It was my 68th birthday, and I was alone. My daughter, Clara, didn't even bother to visit, then texted me to stop being dramatic and demanded $4,400 for breast augmentation. I simply smiled, wrote her a check for $2, and changed all the locks. When she showed up later, pounding on the door, I finally felt peace. If you've ever been betrayed by family, like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. This is just the beginning of my story. The morning air felt crisp, carrying the promise of a beautiful autumn day, a gentle reminder that life, even at 68, still offered moments of quiet beauty. I moved through the familiar rooms of my home, a house that held countless memories, both joyful and bittersweet. Today, I was meticulously preparing for my birthday, a personal ritual that had, over the years, become less about grand celebration and more about clinging to fragile hope. In the living room, I carefully arranged a fresh bouquet of daisies in Arthur's crystal vase, a piece he had loved for its simple elegance. Their white petals seemed to glow, a stark contrast to the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. Then, I set the dining table, pulling out the good china we saved for special occasions. Its delicate pattern, a whisper of past gatherings. My fingers, a little stiff with age, worked with a familiar precision, born of decades of homemaking. Later, I baked a small chocolate cake, its rich aroma filling the kitchen, a scent of comfort and anticipation. For a moment, I paused, spatula in hand, contemplating the candles. 68 seemed like a daunting number, a stark declaration of time's relentless march. Instead, I chose 14 slender candles, a nod to the innocent joy of Clara's 14th birthday, a time when her laughter had still been bright and unburdened by the complexities of adulthood. It was a silent plea, a quiet wish for a glimmer of that past connection to reappear today. I knew my son, Matthew, wouldn't be here. Living in Oregon, his excuses were always justifiable, distance and demanding work projects forming an impenetrable barrier. But Clara, my daughter, lived only 40 minutes away. Still, as the morning melted into afternoon, the phone remained stubbornly silent, the front door steadfastly closed. By 4 p.m., the silence in the house had grown heavy, pressing down on me like a physical weight. The daisies drooped slightly, the china looked too formal for an empty table, and the small chocolate cake sat untouched, its 14 candles standing like tiny, unlit sentinels. I sat alone in the living room, a deep, painful crack beginning to form inside my chest, a fissure that went far beyond the natural aches of my age. It was the ache of a mother's heart, a wound of profound loneliness. With a sigh that felt like it carried the weight of years, I reached for my phone. My thumbs, though slow, found the familiar contacts. I sent a text to both of them, choosing my words carefully, trying to convey the depth of my feelings without sounding accusatory. Feeling a little lonely today, I wrote. It's my birthday, and I miss you both. Sending you all my love. I hoped for a compassionate reply, a simple acknowledgement that would ease the sting. Matthew's response arrived first, a brief, almost perfunctory message. Sorry, Mom. Work emergency. Happy birthday. It was exactly what I expected. A familiar pattern of distance and polite detachment. But it was Clara's reply that landed like a blow, sharp and entirely unexpected. My phone buzzed, and I saw her name. My heart, against all reason, fluttered with a sliver of hope. Perhaps a belated well-wish? A promise to visit tomorrow? The words on the screen were cold, devoid of warmth, stripping away any lingering illusions. Mom, stop being so dramatic. I need $4,400 for my breast augmentation. I read it twice, 3 times, my vision blurring around the edges. Dramatic? On my birthday? Alone? Having hoped for even a moment of her presence? And then, the demand for money casually dropped into a message that contained not a single word of concern for me. The crack in my chest widened. But this time, something else began to form within it. A hard, unyielding core. A strange calm descended upon me, an eerie quiet in the storm of emotion. My hands, surprisingly steady, reached for my checkbook. I scribbled in the date, the amount, and Clara's name, $2. $2. It was a paltry sum, barely enough for a cup of coffee, but in that moment, it felt like a declaration. I tore off the check and found a small note card. On it, I wrote, "Good luck with everything, sweetheart. This should cover your needs perfectly." I slipped both into an envelope, a cool, decisive act. Then, I picked up the phone again. "Miguel," I said, my voice surprisingly level. "It's Eleanor. I need you to come by and change all the locks on the house." "Yes. All of them, as soon as possible." As I spoke, a profound sense of control, a power I hadn't realized I'd lost, surged through me. It was a quiet revolution, unfolding within the familiar walls of my home. Hours later, as dusk settled and cast long shadows across the living room, the doorbell rang, followed by a frantic pounding. "Mom, let me in. What is this ridiculous check? Are you serious?" Clara's voice, shrill with indignation, pierced the stillness of the evening. I walked towards the front door, not opening it, but standing just behind its solid wood. The sound of her furious pounding vibrated through the frame, a rhythmic drumbeat to my newfound resolve. For the first time in 34 years, since the day she was born, since the day I first worried about her, catered to her, sacrificed for her, I felt a profound, unwavering peace. It settled over me like a warm blanket. "I can't believe you, Mom," she shrieked, her voice muffled by the door. "I need a mother who supports me with important things, like plastic surgery. This is crucial for my career." I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with a lightness I hadn't felt in years. "Clara," I said, my voice calm, clear, and steady. "When was the last time you asked how I was doing? When was the last time you called just to talk, not to ask for something, not to complain, but just to share a moment?" The pounding stopped. There was a pause, a long, telling silence on the other side of the door. It stretched, an empty chasm that spoke volumes. In that silence, all my suspicions about her motives, about the nature of our relationship, were confirmed. The silence after my question, "When was the last time you called just to talk?" hung heavy in the evening air, broken only by Clara's restless pacing on the porch. She finally shrieked, her voice edged with a frantic desperation. "Open the door! You're being absolutely ridiculous! Are you actually going to shut me out over this?" I didn't respond immediately. Instead, my mind drifted back, a torrent of memories flooding my thoughts. Just 3 months ago, Clara had shown up on this very porch, her face a mask of manufactured distress. She'd spun a tale about needing $800 for a critical car payment. Her credit card, she'd explained, was inexplicably maxed out, a common refrain in her appeals. I remembered the knot in my stomach, the familiar tug of guilt and obligation. "Of course, sweetheart," I'd said, reaching for my purse, just as I always did. $800. Gone in an instant, just like so many other sums before it. Then there was the Christmas before last, when she'd called, lamenting her inability to afford decent gifts for her children. $600 for gifts, she'd said, as if it were a minimal sum, a mere oversight in her budget. And the year before that, a sudden, urgent plea for $1,200 to replace a broken dishwasher, as if the lack of a modern appliance was a catastrophic emergency. Each request, each amount, was like a small stone dropping into my stomach, accumulating over the years, forming a heavy, cold mass. I had paid for everything, from the trivial to what she deemed essential, all under the guise of helping family. "So what, Mom?" Clara's voice cut through my thoughts, echoing my own silent reflection. "Families help each other. That's what families do." Her tone was indignant, as if her expectation of my financial support was a universal law, an unspoken covenant that I was now brazenly violating. "And when, Clara?" I asked, my voice still calm. "When was the last time you helped me?" The question hung in the air, a stark counterpoint to her self-righteousness. "Do you remember my last birthday dinner, the one you insisted on taking me out for?" I paused, letting the memory linger. "My own birthday dinner, and you sat there, watching me reach for my wallet, not even offering to split it. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was the gesture, the blatant disregard, the casual entitlement that stung the most. A sudden, fierce sob erupted from her. "You are a terrible mother," she shrieked, the words laced with raw anger. "You were never there when I needed you. You worked all the time." Her voice cracked, tears in it now, but I saw them for what they were. Angry tears, born of frustration, not sorrow. I leaned against the door, the solid wood a barrier not just between us, but between my past self and the woman I was becoming. "After your father, Arthur, died," I began, my voice quiet but firm. "I worked 3 jobs, Clara. Do you remember that? Do you remember why?" I paused, letting the unasked question hang. "It was to keep this roof over your head, to keep us in this home, the only home you'd ever known, to make sure you and Matthew had everything you needed, even when I had nothing left to give." I swallowed, the bitterness rising in my throat. "Do you remember the year you needed braces? I missed your school play that year. The big one. The one you had a solo in. I was working a double shift, saving every penny, because your father's insurance didn't cover orthodontics, and I wanted you to have a beautiful smile." My voice softened, but the resolve in my heart hardened. "And your high school graduation? I was supposed to be there, cheering you on. But I was working, again, putting away money for your college savings, even though you decided not to go." Clara continued to cry, a guttural sound that usually melted my resolve. But not tonight. Tonight, I saw through the performance, the manipulative tears that had, for so long, held me captive. They were angry tears, a desperate attempt to regain control, to shift the blame, to force me back into my role as her ever-giving ATM. My best wasn't good enough, I acknowledged, a weary truth in my voice. But it was all I had, Clara. Every ounce of it. Her sobs dwindled, replaced by a raw, uncertain tone. "So, that's it then?" she asked, her voice small, almost childlike. "Are you going to shut me out? Never talk to me again?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I turned from the door, my steps purposeful. I walked to my small desk in the study, a quiet corner filled with books and papers. I opened a drawer, one I hadn't truly looked at in years, though I knew its contents intimately. Inside, meticulously organized, were stacks of bank statements, credit card bills, and various receipts. Each document was a testament, a piece of evidence, all the proof of a pattern, a quiet, insidious drain. I picked up a folder, its contents neatly labeled. I remembered the rush of pride I'd felt when Clara found her first home. "This is for your down payment, $15,000, a significant chunk of my life savings, given freely, out of love, to help her start her independent life." Then came the wedding, a beautiful affair that I was delighted to contribute to, though I found myself paying for more than just the venue. $8,000 for the celebration of her union with Thomas. Later, a $5,000 injection for Thomas's struggling business venture, a loan she promised would be repaid but never was. And just last year, $3,000 for essential kitchen renovations she simply couldn't afford. I laid the documents out on the desk, the numbers adding up quickly in my head. 15,000, plus 8,000, plus 5,000, plus 3,000. $31,000, Clara, I stated, my voice carrying through the closed door, across the porch, and out into the darkening evening. $31,000. In just 5 years. I paused, letting the figure sink in. "And you know what the most painful part is, Clara? You never once said thank you." The heavy silence from beyond the door, following my revelation about the $31,000, was more damning than any protest. It confirmed everything. I stood amidst the scattered documents, the tangible proof of her entitlement, and felt a profound emptiness where my maternal love once resided. Tens of thousands of dollars, a lifetime of savings, gone without a single thank you, without even a moment of genuine appreciation. It was simply expected, a perpetual wellspring she could tap at will. For a fleeting second, the familiar ache of a mother's heart, the instinct to soothe, to comfort, tried to resurface. I heard a muffled sniffle from the porch, a sound that, in years past, would have sent me rushing to her side. But then, the image of the small, untouched chocolate cake on my dining table flashed into my mind, its 14 candles still waiting for a wish that would never be made. The ache receded, replaced by a cold, steady resolve. That phase of my life, the one defined by ceaseless giving and unreciprocated love, was over. Still, a gut feeling, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, told me there was more. I hadn't looked through these files in a long time, entrusting Clara with the casual task of sorting my mail, believing her to be responsible, or at the very least, trustworthy. I returned to my desk, my gaze sweeping over the various folders. My eyes landed on a slim, manila envelope, tucked beneath a pile of utility bills. It was from Coastal Properties, a real estate agency in Myrtle Beach. My beach house, the small cottage Arthur and I had saved for our entire lives, our dream retirement escape. My hands, which had been so steady earlier, began to tremble as I picked it up. The envelope had been opened, and then meticulously, almost too perfectly, resealed. A wave of dread washed over me, cold and sickening. I ripped it open again, discarding the flimsy seal, and pulled out the contents. It was a notice of property sale completion. The words jumped out at me, stark and impossible. My beach house in Myrtle Beach. Sold. 6 months ago. For $235,000. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. $235,000. My beach house. Arthur's dream. Our sanctuary. Gone. My eyes scanned the accompanying forms, the legal documents that confirmed the transaction. And there, at the bottom of each page, was my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It was too neat, too careful, a practiced imitation rather than my natural, slightly shaky script. It was undeniably a forgery. The blood roared in my ears, a sound louder than Clara's sniffling on the porch. Rage, cold and pure, unlike anything I had ever felt, surged through me. It wasn't the fleeting anger of a frustrated mother. It was the fury of a woman betrayed, robbed, violated. I stormed back to the front door, my voice, though low, shaking with an intensity that surprised even myself. "Clara!" I called out, pressing my ear to the wood. "Clara, did you sell the beach house?" Silence. A heavier, more suffocating silence than before. Not the silence of thought, but the silence of guilt, of being caught. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Clara!" I repeated, my voice rising, gaining force with each syllable. "Answer me. Did you sell my beach house?" Then, a hesitant, choked whisper through the door. "Mom. It was... You never went there anymore. It was just sitting empty, and the taxes were killing you." Her voice trailed off, a pathetic attempt at justification. The excuses were a flimsy shield against the tidal wave of my wrath. "The taxes were minimal. Clara!" I retorted, my voice now a controlled roar. "A few $100s a year. And the maintenance? I had a local handyman who looked after it. Barely a burden. It was our dream, Clara. My husband's dream. My retirement." The words spilled out, raw and unfiltered. "You stole my house. You forged my signature. You stole $235,000 from me." From the other side of the door, Clara's sobs intensified. No longer the whiny, manipulative tears, but the raw, guttural sound of someone utterly, irrevocably caught in an unforgivable act. The kind of sound that signifies true, desperate fear. "I needed the money, Mom," she wailed, her voice thick with snot and tears. "I needed it for everything. For life. You don't know how expensive everything is?" My laughter was a bitter, hollow sound. "Expensive?" I scoffed, turning back to my desk. My anger now focused, sharpened by this ultimate betrayal. "I've been supporting your expensive life for years, Clara." I pulled out more records. Bank statements showing transfers to her account, credit card statements with her lavish purchases. Now, let's see just how expensive your everything truly is. The records laid bare on my desk. A mosaic of Clara's expensive life, funded entirely by my silent sacrifices. My voice, now strangely calm, held a razor's edge. "Tell me, Clara," I called out through the door, picturing her still on the porch, her frantic pacing a rhythm to my breaking heart. "When you told Thomas about the $15,000 for your house down payment, what did you say? Did you tell him your mother gave it to you? Or did you invent some elaborate story about a bonus?" I paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. "And the wedding? Did you tell him I paid for most of it? Or did you let him believe you'd saved it all yourselves?" The desperate sobs from the other side of the door abruptly ceased, replaced by a chilling, profound silence. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a confirmation more damning than any confession. "Did you tell anyone the truth, Clara?" I pressed, the words cutting through the quiet. "Anyone at all?" I could almost see her squirming, the carefully constructed facade of her independent, successful life crumbling. It suddenly became clear. Clara hadn't just exploited me. She'd systematically deceived everyone around her, especially Thomas, creating a narrative of financial prowess that I had unwittingly financed. My resentment deepened, solidifying into something cold and hard. She had allowed me to fund her expensive lifestyle, to be her silent benefactor, while she spun tales of her own achievements, basking in the glory of a life she hadn't genuinely earned. "The sickest part of all, Clara," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "is that if you had just asked me, truly and honestly, if you had shown an ounce of respect or gratitude, I probably would have given you most of it. But you didn't ask. You stole." Her response was immediate, sharp, and utterly devoid of remorse. "It was going to be your inheritance anyway," she shrieked, the raw entitlement in her voice striking me like a physical blow. "It's not like you were ever going to use it." My breath hitched. "I'm not dead yet, Clara." The rage finally breaking through my carefully maintained composure. The audacity, the callous disregard for my very existence, was breathtaking. I could hear her pacing again, the frantic steps of a caged animal, trapped and desperate. It reminded me, disturbingly, of Arthur, in his more manipulative moments, pacing and charming, and trying to talk his way out of trouble. "How long, Clara?" I demanded, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. "How long have you been planning this? The house? The forgery?" A long pause, punctuated by a shuddering breath. 2 years, Mom," she finally admitted, her voice small, barely audible. "I started looking into it about 2 years ago." 2 years. 2 years of smiling at me, calling me Mom, accepting my help, all while meticulously plotting to steal my most valuable asset. The revelation was devastating, crushing any last vestiges of hope I might have held for her. "What else, Clara?" I pressed, a cold dread washing over me. "What else have you taken? What else have you forged?" The question hung in the air, a silent accusation. "Just the house, Mom," she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "I swear, nothing else, I promise." But I didn't believe her. My gut, now screaming with alarm, told me there was always more. I walked back to my desk, my gaze sweeping over the remaining files, my mind racing. Then, I saw it. Tucked away in a file labeled Medical Documents was a power of attorney form. I had signed it a year ago, when I was scheduled for gallbladder surgery, a necessary precaution in case of complications. It was a temporary measure, meant to be terminated upon my recovery. Yet, here it was, in the active folder. My blood ran cold. I unfolded the document, my eyes scanning the fine print. It was still active. "Clara!" I called out, my voice dangerously low. "Do you still have active power of attorney over me?" Another long silence. Then, a hesitant. The words felt like a punch to the gut. The world swam for a moment. This was it, the ultimate betrayal, the key to my entire life, handed over out of necessity, weaponized against me. "What have you done with it?" I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. Her confession came in a rush, a torrent of shame and desperation. I opened a credit card in your name, Mom. Just for real emergencies, I swear. It was $12,000. I maxed it out. But I was going to pay it back, really. I just needed it for a few things, and my cards were all full. My legs gave out. I slid down the wall, clutching the cold, unyielding wood, the documents scattered around me like fallen leaves. The extent of her depravity, the utter lack of boundary, the complete destruction of trust, was overwhelming. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had systematically plundered my life savings, my home, and my financial identity. I felt hollowed out, utterly destroyed. "Get out!" I choked out. The words ragged, raw. "Get off my property. And never, ever come back." For the first time in my life, I meant every single syllable. There was no going back from this. I spent the rest of the night hunched over my desk, the dim light of the lamp illuminating my trembling hands as I meticulously calculated the full extent of the damage. $235,000 from the beach house, $12,000 from the maxed-out credit card, another $3,000 in unauthorized withdrawals from my savings account. I'd noticed trickling away but dismissed as my own absent-mindedness. And then, as I dug deeper, I found an additional $24,000, slowly drained from an old savings account I rarely checked, a legacy from my own mother. The total grew to an astronomical figure, over $270,000. Every penny I had worked for, every dream Arthur and I had shared, systematically stripped away. As the first sliver of dawn painted the sky outside my window, a pale gray, I picked up the phone. My fingers, though still trembling, punched in the familiar number. Evelyn Reed, Arthur's trusted lawyer. It was time. It was well past time for legal action. The story of my betrayal is far from over. If you're still listening, I hope you'll continue to follow my journey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to hear how I reclaim my life and navigate the difficult path ahead. The sun had fully risen, casting long, sharp shadows across my driveway. Clara's car was still there, a symbol of her desperate defiance. Its engine idling intermittently. Every few minutes, a blast from the horn shattered the morning quiet, followed by her increasingly hoarse shouts. "Mom, let me in. We need to talk about this." But I had no intention of talking. The talking was over. Instead, I slipped out the back door, where my kind neighbor, Susan, was waiting in her car. Her face was etched with concern, but she didn't ask questions. She simply opened the passenger door, and I slid in, a silent escape from the escalating chaos. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Clara's frantic figure through my rearview mirror, a blur of anger and confusion. It was a sight I knew I would need to get used to. At Evelyn Reed's office, the atmosphere was hushed, professional, a stark contrast to the emotional maelstrom I'd just left. Evelyn, Arthur's longtime lawyer and a woman I deeply respected, listened patiently as I laid out the meticulously organized folders on her polished mahogany desk. Bank statements, credit card bills, the forged deed for the beach house, the active power of attorney. Every document was a fresh stab, but seeing them all together, laid bare, gave me a strange sense of clarity. Evelyn, her expression growing graver with each piece of evidence, finally pushed her reading glasses up her nose. "Eleanor," she said, her voice soft but firm, "this is not just a family dispute. This is fraud, multiple felonies. We're talking about serious prison time for Clara." The words hung in the air, heavy and chilling. Prison. For my daughter. But the shock was fleeting, replaced by a steely resolve. "I want my house back, Evelyn," I stated, my voice steady. "I want those credit cards paid off, completely and immediately. And I want consequences for Clara's actions, every single one of them, even if it means criminal charges." I felt no wavering, no maternal guilt, only a fierce determination to rectify the injustice. Evelyn nodded, her gaze acknowledging my resolve. "It's going to be a lengthy process, Eleanor," she explained, outlining the arduous path ahead. "We'll need to file a police report, initiate a full fraud investigation, and then pursue civil lawsuits to recover your assets. The reversal of the house sale is possible, but it will take time and a judge's order. She paused, her eyes meeting mine directly. This will make the situation public, Eleanor. It will impact Clara's husband, Thomas, and her children. Are you prepared for that? I didn't hesitate. Good, I replied, the word imbued with a cold, cutting finality. Maybe they should know who they're really dealing with. Susan dropped me off a few blocks from my house, a prearranged plan to avoid another confrontation with Clara. As I walked the remaining distance, my phone buzzed incessantly, 17 missed calls from Clara. A barrage of desperate texts, some apologetic, some enraged, all demanding my attention. I ignored them all. My resolve remained unwavering. Instead, the first thing I did upon re-entering my silent, re-locked home was pick up the landline and call the police. Officer Davis arrived within the hour, a young, earnest man who listened with a respectful, if slightly bewildered, expression as I recounted the meticulous details of Clara's deception, laying out the evidence on my kitchen table. He took notes diligently, his pen scratching across the paper, his face growing increasingly somber. When I finished, he looked up, his brow furrowed. "Mrs. Miller," he began, his voice hesitant. "Are you sure you want to press charges against your daughter? These are very serious allegations." I looked him squarely in the eye. "Officer Davis," I said, my voice clear and firm. "If a stranger had stolen nearly $300,000 from me, forged my signature, and opened credit cards in my name, would you ask if I wanted to press charges?" He paused, considering my words, then grimly nodded. "No, ma'am, I would not." "Then there's your answer." The charges were officially filed. A temporary restraining order was issued, prohibiting Clara from coming within 100 feet of my home or contacting me in any way. As soon as the officers left, the phone began to ring again, this time with calls from other estranged family members. 15 voicemails accumulated quickly. My sister Beatrice, my nephew Michael, my niece Olivia, all expressing their shock, their disapproval, their concern for poor Clara. I deleted every single one of them, my finger pressing the button with a decisive click. I was done explaining myself to people who had never truly understood, who had always judged my quiet sacrifices and Clara's overt demands. Later that afternoon, Evelyn called with updates. The banks had frozen all the credit card accounts in my name, a small victory. A court date had been set for the preliminary hearing for property recovery. The State Fraud Division was now actively investigating the sale of the beach house, a process that would likely unearth even more of Clara's deceit. Then Evelyn dropped another piece of information. "Eleanor," she said. "Clara's husband, Thomas, called my office. He's asking for a meeting. Claims he knew nothing about any of this." I paused, considering this. Thomas. I remembered him as a quiet, somewhat overwhelmed man, often overshadowed by Clara's dominant personality. He always seemed to be working, trying to keep up with her escalating demands. I had always wondered if he was truly oblivious, or simply chose to be. "I'll meet with him," I said, a flicker of curiosity stirring within me. "I want to hear what he has to say. And I want to see for myself what role he played in all of this." Meeting Thomas at Evelyn's office felt like stepping into an alternate reality. He was a shadow of the man I remembered, always quiet and somewhat understated. Today he looked utterly defeated, aged beyond his years. His usually neat hair was disheveled, and dark circles sagged beneath his eyes. He sat opposite me, clutching a worn briefcase, his shoulders hunched. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with unspoken accusations and years of hidden truths. "Eleanor," he began, his voice raspy. His gaze flickered to Evelyn, then back to me, filled with a mixture of shame and despair. I met his eyes steadily. "The truth would be a good start, Thomas," I replied, my voice devoid of warmth, yet not overtly hostile. I needed answers, not platitudes. He nodded slowly, then pushed a thick stack of documents across the table. Bank statements, credit card records, loan applications. As I leafed through them, a clearer, more devastating picture emerged. A marriage, and indeed an entire life, built on Clara's elaborate and insidious lies. His finances, too, were in ruins, entangled with hers. Clara always told me you were, well, wealthy, he explained, his voice low, as if ashamed to admit his naivete. She said you had money from a trust fund or an early inheritance to avoid estate taxes. Something complicated about securing your assets. I'm not good with financial stuff. Eleanor, I work hard. I pay what I can. But she always handled the investments, the big decisions. I believed her. I truly did. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. She made it sound like you were happy to help, that it was a way for you to ensure we were comfortable. Evelyn, ever the professional, interjected with a pointed question. What about the beach house, Thomas? At the mention of it, Thomas's already distraught face crumpled. His eyes welled up, and he pressed his palms against his forehead. She told me, you gave it to her, he confessed. The words, a raw whisper. She said you couldn't care for it anymore, that it was too much for you, and that you wanted us to have it. She said we could sell it and use the money to get a bigger house for the kids, a place with a yard for Lily and Noah. My heart, which I thought had hardened irrevocably, gave a painful lurch. Lily, my 8-year-old granddaughter, with her bright, inquisitive eyes and messy pigtails. Noah, 5, all boundless energy and crayon-stained fingers. They called me Grandma Eleanor, and their handmade cards, filled with wobbly hearts and stick figures, were treasures. Clara hadn't just stolen from me. She had used my grandchildren as pawns in her cruel game, twisting my love for them into a justification for her greed. Thomas looked up, tears streaming down his face. Lily and Noah, he pleaded, his voice choked with emotion. They don't know any of this. They love you, Eleanor. Please, don't let them lose their grandmother because of what Clara did. Please don't take their mother away completely. My emotional wall, meticulously rebuilt over the past few days, developed a hairline crack. It wasn't my responsibility. I knew that. Clara's choices were hers alone, but the children, they were innocent. This isn't my doing, Thomas, I said, my voice softer than I intended, a gentle tremor betraying my composure. Clara made these choices, not me. I know, he choked out. And I'm going to make sure she pays for them. I want to help you, Eleanor. I want to testify against her. I'll do anything to help you recover your money, to right this wrong. I can't live with this, knowing what she's done to you, to all of us. His determination, stark and unwavering, was a powerful force. Evelyn, sensing a shift, leaned forward. Thomas, you need to understand the full implications of what you're saying. If you testify, if we proceed with criminal charges and this evidence, Clara could face very severe consequences. We are talking about prison for a very long time. He met her gaze, his own resolute. She stole from Eleanor, he stated, his voice gaining strength. She stole from her own mother. She defrauded me. She lied about everything. That's not the woman I married, and it's certainly not the mother I want raising my children. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a new resolve hardening his features. I'll cooperate fully. I'll give you everything I have. Looking at Thomas, truly seeing the devastation Clara had wrought on his life and, by extension, on my grandchildren's, something inside me softened further. The children, they were the true victims here, caught in a web of deceit they couldn't comprehend. They deserved a chance at a normal life, untainted by their mother's crimes. I turned to Evelyn. If Thomas cooperates fully, I asked, my voice tinged with a new, unexpected emotion. Is there a possibility of a plea agreement, restitution, but perhaps without prison time for Clara, for the sake of the children? Evelyn considered this, her expression thoughtful. It's certainly possible, Eleanor, she confirmed. With Thomas's cooperation and a strong case for full restitution, we could certainly explore that option with the prosecutor. 3 weeks had passed since Thomas's tearful confession, weeks filled with a whirlwind of legal proceedings. My beach house was in the process of being returned, the forged deed nullified. The fraudulent credit card accounts were closed, and the banks were working with Evelyn to clear my name. The criminal investigation into Clara's actions was ongoing, fueled by Thomas's meticulous records and his willingness to cooperate. Then, Evelyn called. Her voice, usually so steady, carried a hint of urgency. "Eleanor, Clara's lawyer has contacted us. They want to negotiate." She paused, then added, "Thomas filed for divorce last week, by the way, and the state's prosecutor is preparing to charge Clara with elder abuse and multiple counts of felony fraud. She's looking at 25 years to life." Despite everything, a tightness formed in my chest at the thought of Clara, my daughter, just 34 years old, facing such a bleak future. 25 years. It was a lifetime. A small part of my old self, the mother who had loved her unconditionally, grieved for the life she had thrown away. Her terms are full restitution. Naturally, Evelyn continued, pulling me back to the present. A guilty plea to the fraud charges, in exchange for probation instead of prison time. And she wants to see you, Eleanor, to apologize. My first instinct was an emphatic no. The thought of facing her, of seeing the architect of my pain, was repellent. "Absolutely not," I stated, my voice firm. "Eleanor," Evelyn gently countered, "I understand your reluctance, but sometimes, for your own closure, it can be helpful to look her in the eye and say what needs to be said, to hear what she has to offer." I considered her words. Closure. A final reckoning. "All right," I conceded, a weary sigh escaping me. "But Thomas will be there as a witness. And I want everything recorded. Every word." The meeting was set for the following afternoon at Evelyn's office. Thomas arrived early, looking less disheveled but still burdened. His gaze was distant, his face a roadmap of recent emotional turmoil. When Clara entered the conference room, my breath hitched. She was barely recognizable. Her usually vibrant hair was dull, her eyes hollow, and her face, once plump with careless youth, was gaunt. The expensive clothes she once flaunted were replaced by simple, unkempt attire. The confident, demanding woman I knew was gone, replaced by a ghost of her former self. She refused to meet my gaze, keeping her eyes fixed on the highly polished surface of the conference table. Her lawyer, a stern-faced woman, sat beside her, offering a minimal, reassuring touch to her arm. "Mom," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." My anger, though tempered by a strange sense of pity, flared. "How far did you mean for it to go, Clara?" I asked. My voice flat, emotionless. She wrung her hands. "I was drowning, Mom. In debt. I couldn't keep up. Everything was so expensive." I pushed back, her hollow excuses ringing false. "So, you decided to steal from me?" I countered. "You didn't decide to borrow, as you'd probably tell Thomas. You actively defrauded me." She flinched. "I was going to pay it back," she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "Which of your emergencies were real, Clara?" I pressed, leaning forward, determined to strip away every layer of her deceit. "The car payment? The dishwasher? The Christmas gifts? Emma's dental work?" Tears welled in her hollow eyes, silently tracing paths down her cheeks. "The dishwasher was fine," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "And the credit card debt was exaggerated. I just needed money." Her gaze flickered to Thomas, then back down. "The Christmas money was for expensive gifts, to impress Thomas's family. And Emma didn't need emergency dental work. I just used that as an excuse to get money for braces for her." The casual cruelty of her lies, especially using her own child's well-being as a pretense for theft, was staggering. "And the beach house?" I demanded. "Why the elaborate forgery? Why not just ask?" She finally lifted her gaze, meeting mine for a fleeting second, a flicker of her old defiance in her eyes. "Because you would have lectured me, Mom," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. Her lawyer intervened, sensing the conversation spiraling. "Mrs. Miller," she interjected, Clara is prepared to make full restitution. She understands the severity of her actions. She's willing to sell her jewelry, her car, everything she has of value. She's prepared to work multiple jobs, as many as it takes, to pay you back. Evelyn then stepped in, laying out the state's proposed deal. Based on full cooperation, Thomas's testimony, and immediate full restitution, the prosecutor is willing to offer a plea agreement. A guilty plea to fraud charges, 5 years probation, community service, and mandatory financial counseling. No jail time. I looked at Clara, then at Thomas, who sat quietly, his face a mask of weary resolve. The thought of Lily and Noah being without their mother, even one as flawed as Clara, tugged at me. "I have one final demand," I said, my voice clear. "I want a written apology. Not to me, to Lily and Noah, explaining why their mommy won't be living with them anymore, and that her bad choices led to this." Clara's face paled. Will I still be allowed to see my children?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. "That," I replied, "is up to Thomas." Her gaze, filled with a raw, desperate fear, shifted back to me. "Will you still be their grandmother, Mom?" she whispered, the question loaded with the unspoken plea for her children's stability, for some remnant of family. I looked at my daughter, broken, and facing the consequences of her greed. I thought of Lily's crayon hearts, Noah's infectious giggle. "Yes, Clara," I said, my voice quiet. "I'll still be their grandmother." I stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. As I walked past her, I paused, my hand resting briefly on the back of her chair. "Clara," I said, my voice firm but without malice. "The next time you need help, try asking instead of stealing. You might be surprised by the answer." 6 months had woven their way into the fabric of my life, each day a gentle unraveling of the painful past and a quiet restitching of new beginnings. Today, I stood on the weathered deck of my beach house in Myrtle Beach, the salty air, a soothing balm, the rhythmic crash of waves, a lullaby to my soul. It was mine again, legally restored and entirely mine, Clara having signed over the deed without so much as a whimper of protest. The house, once a symbol of betrayal, now felt like a bastion of peace, a testament to my resilience. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Thomas. "Lily and Noah want to know if they can help with your garden this weekend." A small smile touched my lips. "Tell them to bring their old clothes," I typed back, the simple message carrying a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Lily and Noah understood, as best as children could, that their mommy now lived in an apartment, separate from their dad. Thomas had handled the difficult conversations with a grace and honesty I wouldn't have expected from him before. He had grown so much since shedding the heavy burden of Clara's lies. He was still quiet, but now, there was a newfound strength in his demeanor, a calm resolve that resonated with my own. Clara, I knew, was working 2 jobs, fulfilling the terms of her plea bargain. The full restitution was a long road, but she was making progress. At her current rate, it would take her 9 years to pay me back, rather than the initial 11 Evelyn had calculated. A strange satisfaction settled in my heart, knowing that for the first time in her adult life, Clara was truly working for what she had. Later that afternoon, a familiar, joyful clamor erupted from the driveway. Lily, now sporting a missing front tooth and even messier pigtails, tumbled out of Thomas's car, followed by a perpetually energetic Noah. They rushed towards me, their faces alight with the innocent excitement of childhood, carrying small bags of sunflower seeds and tiny shovels. My garden, a patch of earth I'd neglected for too long, was about to be reborn. Thomas joined us, a subtle ease in his posture, a lightness in his eyes that reflected the freedom of his divorce. He was no longer carrying the crushing weight of Clara's deceit, no longer trying to balance her elaborate fictions with the harsh realities of their finances. He looked, for the first time, like a man truly living his own life. As we knelt in the soft soil, guiding Lily's small hand to sprinkle the sunflower seeds, she looked up at me, her brow furrowed with a child's earnest curiosity. "Grandma Eleanor," she asked, her voice soft, "why doesn't Mommy visit you anymore?" I paused, carefully choosing my words, wanting to be honest without burdening her young heart. Sometimes, sweet pea, I began, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. Grown-ups make choices that hurt other people, and those choices have consequences. So, your mommy needed to move to a different place to learn from her choices and make things right. Noah, always more direct, piped up, "But you still love her?" I looked at his earnest, trusting face. "I love the little girl she used to be, Noah," I replied, a bittersweet pang in my heart. The little girl who drew me crayon hearts and held my hand. But love, sweet boy, doesn't mean you have to let people hurt you. Sometimes, loving someone means you have to protect yourself. My phone vibrated again. "Evelyn." "Eleanor," she said, her voice bright with good news. "Just wanted to let you know. The last of the credit card debt is officially paid off. Clara's 6 months ahead of schedule." A sense of finality washed over me, a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying, finally lifting. "That's wonderful, Evelyn," I responded, a genuine smile in my voice. "She also asked if she could write you a letter," Evelyn added, a slight hesitation in her tone. I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing Clara's hollow face in that conference room. The idea of her words, no matter how contrite, still felt too raw, too soon. "Not yet, Evelyn," I said gently. "I'm not ready for that kind of contact." "Understood," Evelyn replied. "It's truly remarkable, Eleanor, the change in her. She's really committing to turning her life around." My life at the beach house was a far cry from the lonely existence I had known for so long. The silence, once heavy with absence, was now filled with the gentle sounds of the ocean, the laughter of my grandchildren, and the quiet hum of my own contentment. I had joined a book club, started taking painting classes, and found a wonderful group of women who met for walks along the shore. I was no longer just Eleanor, the mother, the widow. I was Eleanor, the woman, charting her own course. Even Matthew had found his way back, albeit slowly. He called more often, his conversations less rushed, more genuine. He was planning a Christmas visit for the first time in 4 years, a small but significant step towards rebuilding our fractured family, one founded on honesty rather than obligation. I sent him a text that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues. "I'm more than well," I wrote. "I'm happy." And as I hit send, I realized the profound truth of those words. For the first time since Arthur died, I was genuinely, deeply happy. Clara's betrayal, which I had thought would destroy me, had actually set me free. It had forced me to confront uncomfortable truths, to draw firm boundaries, and to finally reclaim my life from years of silent suffering. It had been a painful, devastating journey, but one that ultimately led me back to myself. I settled into Arthur's old rocking chair on the deck, the wood worn smooth by years of use, and watched the last sliver of sun disappear into the vast expanse of the ocean. This was my second chance, a gift I had given myself by choosing to stand up, to speak out, and to demand the respect I deserved. It all began with $2 and a locked door, the simplest of actions that unlocked a lifetime of freedom.